Hey folks, so I've been spending a lot of time with tools like Cursor and Claude Code, vibe coding as they say, but more so as a business operator and a learner and less so as a coder, trying to build some practical business applications to solve some of our own business friction points. I started sharing my workflow, the planning docs, the prompts, the whole thing with other non-technical operators, and seeing it click for them made me think it might be helpful to share more broadly. My goal here isn't to show a perfect process, but more so to build a practical path for business operators to build some useful prototypes, accelerate our learning curves, and start to build what I think is really an essential muscle for working effectively with AI tools. So let's walk through that exact process as I start the build out of an AI sales call assistant. Okay, so this is Cursor. It's an AI enhanced code editor, and I use it as my development environment as well as my assistant as I code. On the left here, you can see the file explorer with all project files. I'll get into these in a second. These are just the three that I usually start with. The middle panel is the editor where we can view and edit code. And on the right is probably the most important, Cursor's AI assistant panel, which is incredibly powerful as a feature. So many props over to them. There are three modes that you can be in here. There's Ask, Agent, Edit. I know I'm going in a weird order here, but bear with me. So Ask mode, this is where you can ask questions about the code base, request any sort of explanations, get suggestions. It's felt like I've had this senior developer looking over my shoulder who I can ask questions to and will give me advice. So I'll use this to understand complex code, debug some issues, and get recommendations. And then there's agent mode. This turns the AI into a proactive assistant that can complete multi-step tasks. So I'll say something like refactor this function to be more efficient, which is awesome. It'll go do that all by itself. You could even say, build this feature out and it'll take care of all of that, which is really amazing. And it'll work through all of that step by step. Really cool to see. It's a great agent use case. And then edit, this allows the AI to directly modify code. Now, again, I'll show you all these later in the video. I can select a section and ask it to optimize it, refactor, enhance it with specific features, which is really cool. And then you can also select which models you want to use. So here, I default usually to either Claude 3.5 or 3.7. Claude is really fantastic at understanding code and providing some detailed explanations. For really complex architectural questions, that's when I'll go and use 3.7 as opposed to 3.5, which has reasoning capabilities. And then there's also these other models that I like to use for different use cases. Holistically, the beauty of having this assistant integrated directly in the editor is that it can have full context of your entire code base. And so it can reference files, understand dependencies, make suggestions specific to your project, which is different than if you just ask the same question about some part of your code or one file in ChatGPT or Claude. This knows your entire code base as it's answering your question, and you can actually prompt it with giving specific parts of context, and code base is one of the context files you can throw in there. So when you ask the question, it'll have the context of your code base. With that, I think the most important part of vibe coding is actually what happens before you write any code or talk to any coding assistant. There's these three documents that I have here on the left, and I'm going to walk through not just what they are, but how to create them and how I go about specifically creating them and why they matter so much. So with that, let's do the PRD. Okay, the product requirement document, or the PRD as it's shortened to. The process always starts with the real business pain. And for this AI call assistant, our sales team has been at times struggling to consistently remember all of Dynap's services during calls, when to bring it up. It's a lot of information to have, as well as to gather the appropriate information that we need for our proposals and for our statements of work. As you saw in the statement of work generator, there's specific piece of data that would be really helpful to write a really good statement of work. So after discussing these challenges with our team and our CEO, we identified that an AI assistant could really help solve this problem. And having an agent listen in on the call and in real time prompt our sellers with ideas of how they could be selling better. And of course, they're listening to active listening, and so it's not very obtrusive, but it gives suggestions as you're on a call. So that's what we're aiming to build. So this is the fully built out product requirement document. But before getting into it, how I actually build it is I actually start with Claude, a blank Claude chat. And this is, again, when magic happens before I write a single line of code. So let me actually show you my actual workflow. So first I'll start with a prompt that sets up Claude as my product development partner. So I'll say something like, and here also another thing I do is I transcribe a lot of things that I write into these LLMs. So I have a transcription tool called Super Whisper. It's really great. So what I'll say is something like, act like an expert product manager with years of experience in B2B SaaS AI tools. I have an idea for an internal AI sales call assistant to help our reps during client conversations. I'd like you to use my conversation with you to flesh out the idea and the features. And I will transcribe that. Give that a second. And then I'll use actually Claude Sign 3.7. That goes in there. And from here, I'll have a back and forth conversation with Claude, sharing our sales team's pain points, exploring potential features, and refining the concept. And what's amazing, I think, about this approach is how it forces me to articulate my thinking and uncover gaps in my thinking, and it adds to the rigor of building the product. It's nice to have that thought partner. And after a few iterations, I'll ask Claude to help structure this into an actual formal document using a prompt template that I found on X. There's some really great PRD templates out there. This one was given or written by a guy named Ian Nuttall, and I will thank him in person, hopefully at some point in my life. And so then I'll usually say something like, now that we've explored the concept, could you help me organize this into a well-structured PRD? Follow the attached instructions. And that'll go in, and then I can link this to whoever's interested, but the PRD instructions that Ian provided, I'll paste that in there. With Claude, if it's a long document, it'll go into a TXT file. So these are the instructions. You're a senior product manager, expert in PRDs, and it'll write out all the sections that I really appreciate. The product overview, business goals, role-based cases, user stories, et cetera, et cetera. So that's in there. And then I'll usually just hit send and see the way it spits out. So again, Ian's in particular provides a comprehensive structure, and it remains flexible enough for different project types as well. Again, you'll see the business goals, user goals, personas, basic persona details, role-based access, functional requirements, all the features are in there, the user experience, et cetera, et cetera. And I really like doing this in Claude. Claude, what popped out here, if you haven't used Claude before, is it's a feature called artifacts. And that's where they put documents it generates or code or even applications. It's a really cool feature that and once it finishes creating, I'll be able to show you some of the fun features that actually inspired the statement of work, some of the features I put into the statement of work. I'll let it finish there. So when it's done creating, you can actually go in and highlight specific parts and change them, thinking through it with Claude. If you want to improve this, change this, you just type it in and it'll change it on the left-hand side there. And what I love about this is I'm getting a thoughtfully organized document that incorporates all the context from our previous conversation. So it's really like having a product consulting there, helping me structure my thinking. So of course, like I was saying before, the first draft is never perfect. So I'll spend time refining it, asking Claude to expand certain sections, adjusting language, incorporating some additional insights from stakeholders. And then again, through that collaborative process with Claude, it's really transformed how I approach product development in general. And I'm not just documenting requirements, I'm actually thinking deeply about the problem and exploring solutions with a really expert thought partner who's refining me and my vision before writing a line of code, which I'm sure if I were working with developers, they would appreciate that too, regardless. So after getting that initial draft, I'll refine each section based on additional research, team feedback. And over here, the product overview is really the North Star of what we're building. It lays out the tool providing real-time guidance during sales calls. And the business goal section answers why this matters to Dynab, enhances our sales effectiveness, accelerating sales cycles. You can go down to the user goals and see the shift and perspective to our sales reps needs, and mastering that consultative selling and reducing administrative work. We get into the functional requirements down here as well. If you scroll down, you can see the functional requirements. They outline exactly what we need the system to do: real-time transcription, context-aware prompting, sentiment analysis, knowledge-based integration, et cetera, et cetera. And it gets into way more detail, which is really great. But to sake of time, I'm going to pull up and say, yeah, so that's the PRD. And again, what makes this PRD particularly valuable for vibe coding is its clarity and its completeness. We're providing some rich context to the AI up front, which dramatically reduces the back and forth later and really does produce better results. So now I'm going to kick us back to Cursor and this block of a lot of text. I know it's a little intimidating, so just bear with me for a second. But once the PRD is solid, I'll create this technical design document. And this is where my collaboration with AI has actually been most educational for me, both this and the PRD. I prompt Claude, usually 3.7, to act as a software architect and with over 20 years of experience, and ask it to translate our business requirements into this technical architecture that is going to be here. Again, I don't expect you probably don't want to read through it all. Your eyes are probably glazing over, but I'll talk through it a little bit with you. Again, this document for every application I build, it teaches me so much, and it forces me to learn a lot because I have to go research what it's saying to me and if I believe what I'm learning and their suggestions. I think when I started creating these terms like vector database, WebSockets, those are just buzzwords, but through the iterative process I have with Claude as I'm building this, so I use a very similar process to build the technical design document as I did with the PRD with Claude. I'll understand why Claude has recommended certain technologies over others. And I'll research unfamiliar concepts and really refine the architecture with it. I think it's probably a mistake just to take the architecture it gives you as, oh yeah, we should just do this. I had that like the first time, and really it took way longer than me actually understanding the suggestions it had. Oh, why does it choose this model in this instance versus that model in that other instance? Or why are we building this on Vercel? Why is it faster to build on Vercel than on AWS, et cetera, and deploy it there? So that's been really helpful. And it gives me a firm and understanding of these systems, which I think is really important. So usually I'll have an architecture diagram in here showing how the components interact. And then the technology recommendations, like I said before, are really crucial. Every time I think I go through a new application, my questions get a little more refined. And again, I'm not just accepting these recommendations blindly anymore. I'm engaging critically with technology choices based on what I've learned from previous projects. Yeah. So really helpful part of this. And then finally, I have a little style guide that I've put together over the few applications that I've built. So it defines the visual language, the user experience. So it's evolved over the multiple projects. I don't think I could really articulate what certain interfaces felt better than others at the beginning, but now like I know certain colors or certain eye elements and like buttons, real-time display elements. I threw this in here one time because I was building another application and it had it, and I had some preferences about how it was built. I really like translucency apparently. What I'll do to build out the style guide originally was I would send some pictures to Claude and say, why do I like this? I like this. It seems similar to this. What are the similar components that I like? The unifying components that I like here, and it'll articulate it for me as a UI expert. So I'll say, act as a UI UX expert and tell me in your articulate language, what am I looking at? What is this UI component here? And it'll describe it, and then I'll add it in here, like the cards and containers, the tables, the various styles they have is from other projects. So these 3 documents, they represent hours of thoughtful work ahead of time, but they're what separates, I think, successful vibe coding from frustrating just trial and error, just shooting left and right. They provide really comprehensive context to the AI, which then reduces the unnecessary back and forth while still leaving some room for AI to apply its expertise. What's, I think, most empowering is how creating these documents has really transformed my own understanding. And I'm not just directing AI to build something anymore. I'm genuinely participating in the technical conversation with growing knowledge and confidence. And so, yeah, so I recommend this it's a long, painful process, but it's really good to do. So with that, we're going to move over to the next section where I'm going to set up the development environment. Okay, so now that we have these 3 foundational documents, there's one more step I take before I actually start coding. And what I do is I work with Claude in Cursor using the ask function, and I craft specific prompts for Claude Code. So it's a meta prompt approach that helps me to create these optimal prompts, these series of prompts that I can spit back into Claude Code. You'll see what I mean in a second here. So this is the meta prompt. I'm attaching 3 key documents for my application: PRD, style guide, technical design document. Based on these materials, I need some guidance on how to effectively communicate with Claude Code. So it'll create these, I want it to create these prompts for me. Please create a structured sequence of prompts I should use with Claude Code to implement this application. And I put some rules down, including leveraging them as reasoning models, which you prompt them differently than standard models, and some other stuff in there. So what I'll do is I'll copy this in, and then, like I said before, one of the beautiful things about Cursor is that it's hooked up to your code base, so you can actually reference your code base and ask it specific questions with the knowledge that it knows about your code base. I'm going to stick this meta prompt in here. I'm going to use Claude 3.7, and it's going to spit out, first it's going to read our code base, those 2 files. It's going to think for a while. You can see up here, and it's going to spit out a series of prompts to put into Claude Code, or to Cursor if you wanted to use the agent mode here to build this out. What this gives me is really like a comprehensive prompt strategy document that breaks down the entire development process into these discrete manageable chunks. It usually includes some sort of initialization prompt for project setup, separate prompts for each major module. So for us, like authentication, audio capture, transcription, et cetera, integration prompt at the end to bring everything together, and then a testing and deployment prompt to complete the project. And you can see that as it's creating, you can see all that. So it's creating different prompts for each of those modules. And then at the end, knowledge-based implementation, et cetera. It's still going. So this structured approach really ensures that I'm not overwhelming Claude Code with too much at once, and that each component builds logically on the one that came before. So kind of like having an experienced developer plan out the entire development roadmap for you, which is really convenient. So with that, let's set up our environment. Okay, so now let's set up our development environment. So I use 2 complementary tools, one of which I already showed you guys. This is Cursor, gives us an AI enhanced code editor. You can see we can view, edit, and ask questions about our code. And then the other is Claude Code, which acts as our AI pair programmer. It's going to generate the actual implementation based off our requirements. Very similar to what the agent mode does here. I just have had better success with Claude Code, and I'm pointing to a blank terminal. The way you open Claude is, instead of clicking on an icon, is you go over to your file folder, which I already navigated to, and then you type in Claude and it opens it up. And then you initialize it the first time you open it, which means that it's indexing your code base, which is why it's important when you're starting something new to have the PRD, the technical design document style guide, because it's understanding what we're trying to do. And then it'll spit back out a Claude markdown file with the code base documentation that it's created. So you'll see it's generating, it's thinking through things, which is fun to watch it do. I'll analyze the code base and create a markdown file. It's telling you exactly what it's thinking, and then it'll go through its process. It's an agent over there. While it's running, let me also explain how I use kind of Cursor and Claude together. And again, you can use pretty much Claude Code. It's very similar to the agent mode here with Cursor. But for me, Claude Code has really excelled at generating these complete implementations from really high-level descriptions. So I use it to create the initial code structure and components. And then Cursor excels at exploring, understanding, and making these targeted modifications to the existing code. So I use Cursor to review what Claude Code generates, understand how it works, and make some refinements, which I'll show you later. And then, but together they create a powerful workflow for me that balances this AI driven generation with my human refinement. Oh, okay. So on the right-hand side here, it's created that markdown file. It says what's in it. And then it asks you, this is its UI, its UX. It'll ask you if you want to create that file. And then what you'll see if you look on the left side here is if you hit yes, it'll create it. And there we have the markdown file. So really cool to see. And then I'll give a little summary. Now I can show you actually how I use Claude Code to actually build the application now that it's been initialized. For the sake of time, I'm just going to demonstrate the initial project setup prompt that we set up when we went back here and we created these structured prompts with that meta prompt. But the same approach applies to every component in our system. I think the reason for that is I've learned through some mistakes with vibe coding, especially. One of the core principles now in my development approach is building a application in a very modular fashion. The modular architecture makes the code base more maintainable, simplifies the testing, parallel development by multiple team members if needed, and then gives us flexibility. This has happened to me a couple of times, to replace or upgrade individual components without disrupting the entire system, which has been awesome. That's very helpful. Now, let me show you how to use Claude Code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that first prompt from the meta prompt that we created up here, and I'm going to paste it into Claude Code. And it's pasted as 27 lines. Claude Code is very smart. It condenses these long pasted words or lots of words. And I'm just going to hit enter, because we already read through that. We already checked the prompt. And what's happening now is it's pretty remarkable. The first time it happened to me, I was like, what is this? Just with this single prompt, Claude Code, if you read through what's happening here, is creating an entire project foundation, setting up our Next.js, configuring TypeScript, implementing our custom Tailwind theme based on the style guide we had created, and it's establishing all the development infrastructure we need, right? Because that's how we set up that first prompt. If you remember, sorry, I didn't scroll all the way up to it. And just as a reminder, yeah, it's setting all of that up for us. Again, when I first started seeing this, oh yeah, and so it'll go back to the UI. Before it writes the things, it'll ask, and you could say, yes, don't ask again this session. No, if you don't agree, obviously redo it and whatnot. And then I'm not going to redo it again for the sake of time. I ran this separately, pretty similarly, just to make sure it worked. And so yes, I'm going to hit yes. And also what's cool is if you look here on the left-hand side, you'll see it build out our application. And again, it kind of feels like magic, but that's because at the first few times I didn't really understand what was being created. But now I'm going to say yes, and don't ask again. You can ask this and it'll just go. And it's kind of like surfing. And you're just writing it. Again, you can see it starting to get built out all over here. But yeah, but within each project now, I can find myself recognizing more patterns and understanding more of the code and learning why certain approaches are used, which is really cool to learn that. And it's really fun. It's a challenge to think through it. And it's very gratifying in my head, at least. I like learning by doing in this way. I'm going to let it just run. And while it goes, you'll see the time it goes. And I'm probably just going to work in the background. Sometimes I just do that. And as it's going, and then I'll just go back over when it prompts me to. So I'll probably fast forward some of this. Okay, it's all done, and it's nice that it gives a little review of what it did here, and then obviously there's lines and lines that you go through of what it actually did. It's quite long. And you can see on the left-hand side everything it built. And what I like to do, because I put in that part of the prompt where I ask it to create some way for me to run the program and see if it worked, what I'll do is I'll open up the terminal here in Cursor and I'll run it, npm run dev, because it's a Node.js program. I will then go to the aforementioned localhost 3000, which will open up here, and we'll run it again, localhost 3000, and you see it's working. And so this is just, again, it's not what it's going to look like at all, but it's just a test to make sure that everything it did is working. But this isn't actually what the end product will look like. It doesn't have all of our styling. It's not, it doesn't have the UX we want in there either. But you can see it's picked up on some of the things. So you can launch Assistant. It looks like it's created some sort of dashboard with some dummy data, what the buttons will look like. I don't think start new call yet, it won't work. Go back home. And yeah, so it's really cool. And one more thing I want to show you is how I use Cursor a little bit here too, where you can have it look through your entire code base. And I can say something like, what part of the code built the test application? And usually for just questions like this, I just use 3.5. It'll read through the code base and it'll say, what did it? Which is really cool for learning purposes as well. And then if you ever need to fix something, like later on, what I do is sometimes the UI isn't quite what I want it to be. If I want this blue to be the same as this white, I'll type in and put it in agent mode and say, please turn the blue launch assistant button white instead of blue in the test. And then it'll go and try to do it. And we'll give it a shot here. I may fast forward this part of the video. Okay, so there you go. It looks like it changed it, not a color that I would want it to, but you get the point, is that you can make changes in here after and make them more precise changes than what Claude Code does. I will say it's always good to be a little safe about what it's doing and make sure you understand what's going on if you can. And just as another recap, we'll go back to the Claude Code page here. So that one prompt created all of this, and I think it's pretty remarkable. It has the basic file structure and whatnot. And this was all from a deep understanding of our requirements in our planning document. It couldn't have done that without building out really good planning documents. So it's not just following a template, it's implementing our specific needs, and based on our PRD, our technical design, and our style guide over there. Yeah, it's still going here. So for a complete application, I'll continue this process component by component using these prompts, putting them in. So next, I would probably go back, and you can go into the history and go back for the structured prompt, the second prompt, and I'd copy and paste that in after doing a little bit more review, making sure I won't break anything with that second one and it's not duplicative with anything. But that's how it goes. And then you just go one after the other until it's all done. And that's how I've done it. And usually there are bugs, you have to go debug it, but that's where this is really useful. The Cursor, or even using Claude, has been really useful to debug things. Okay, so that wraps up the walkthrough of starting the build of the sales assistant. Hopefully that gives you a concrete idea of what this vibe coding workflow actually looks like in practice for an operator tackling a real business problem. It's definitely iterative. You're going to hit snags, but the ability to rapidly prototype solutions like this is really powerful. And again, this approach really shines for building some useful internal personal tools, validating ideas quickly, and demystifying some of the technology by doing. Just to keep in mind, for those business critical scalable applications, you'll want to bring in some experienced developers to build on these foundations. Given how quickly tools like Cursor and Claude Code and AI in general are evolving, my own process continues to adapt. And that's why staying connected with others experimenting in the space is really key. So check out those X handles that I'll provide. And I hope this was helpful in showing one practical path forward for folks like us. And feel free to drop any questions or learnings that you may have that could help me as well. And good luck with your projects.